Alright guys, Fula coming to you with another video. Shout outs to the whole LDBC. Man, I hate to get political. I really do. But this video, man, is going to be a long video and it's probably gonna make me lose subscribers too. But seeing that this is my platform and everybody is given a platform to speak their mind and express themselves, I'm just going to express myself in regards to this topic. Now, as an African, especially as an African immigrant, I'm just going to say we come from a culture of handouts, basically. We come from a culture of basically now looking to see if the grass is greener on the other side. This is just what we're faced with, I'm just being real with you. Yes, there was a time in Africa during the pre-colonial age where we were self-sufficient, where we were governed ourselves. We had self-government, basically. You know what I mean? But the problem is that colonialism ravaged us. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. Colonialism has left scars that are hard to heal, man. Very, very difficult to heal. So, when we see an African, or when we see someone who may not necessarily be African go against the grain, decide not to accept handouts, decide to be in control of their own destiny, decide to build it up from the ground up using their most valuable asset, which is their people. When we see these things, some of us look at it as a beacon of hope. Some of us look at it as, if they can do it, we can do it too. Some of us have that in our being. Or if we don't have it in our being, it grows after time after time after time, looking at examples, other examples. Now, what I'm going to say is that, when we really think about things, and when we really look at history, when it comes to Western history, we're often told that their enemies are our enemies as well. Their enemies are against basically what we're against, while at the same time using, exploiting, and just making a mockery of us, right? So now, if someone asks me, if an American asks me, well, who are your political role models, or who are the guys you look towards? They're not going to like my answers. You know, they're not going to like that I'm going to say Maurice Bishop from Grenada. They're not going to like me wearing a Fidel Castro t-shirt. They're not going to like me wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt. They're not going to like me wearing a Amilcar Cabral or a Thomas Sankara t-shirt. They're not going to like me wearing a leader that I'm going to talk about right now. They're not going to like me wearing a Kim Il-sung t-shirt. So basically, how I grew to basically come to my conclusion on North Korea and come to my conclusion that I support the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea has to do with a couple of instances. The first instance was with immediate family. My uncle sat me down and he told me that, not only did the Cubans help us decolonize, but also the North Koreans helped us decolonize as well. And as a matter of fact, my uncle went to North Korea, to see what was going on and to actually, be part of a delegation to receive the help needed to decolonize, So, I'm thinking to myself, like, it kind of blew my mind. I'm like thinking, like, man, when you look at the United States, what you see is like the smear campaigns on North Korea. North Korea is oppressive. North Korea is a brutal dictatorship. Millions of people are trying to escape North Korea. Basically, North Korea is this, that, and the other. North Korea is a threat to the United States. North Korea is against democracy. And I'm thinking to myself, when my uncle told me this, I'm like, God, I'm like, wow, I never knew you went. And so the second episode was when we, one time it was on a trip to Nigeria, and I happened to go to Abuja. When I went to Abuja, there was an individual there who embraced the North Korean ideology and said that, if Africa copied it, then, we would be well off and we would have dignity. And he also went on to say that, using their ideology doesn't necessarily mean we become them. It doesn't necessarily mean we start eating kimchi and, doing all that stuff. He just says, looking at the problems, looking at basically the problems we deal with, that ideology would be the solution. Now, another thing too, that like I didn't know, is that the leaders that I always read from, many of them went to North Korea. Many of them had support from North Korea. Maurice Bishop from Grenada got support from North Korea for his revolution, military and agricultural support. Amilcar Cabral, the one that my dad served under, military, and I want to say, like, what's a good word to use? logistics support from North Korea. Thomas Senakura, same exact thing. As a matter of fact, the pistol that Thomas Senakura used to carry around, that was a gift from the North Korean leader, Kim Il-sung. Samora Machel, North Korea, went there, was about to give up on the colonial struggle, but had a real sit down with the leader of the time and decided to keep it going and rethink his strategy for decolonization. And we must not forget Che Guevara, of course. Now, my thing is this. The ideas that North Korea have can be applied to different aspects of life. You know, the ideas that these great individuals had, they're not only like for politics, they're for the whole, they're for your every part of your life, you know. Like, that's how in my entrepreneurship, like by reading these guys, like I became, I guess you can say, more radical, but my radicalness showed in my actions with how I like marketed my products and whatnot, and how I set up my business, you know. It didn't have to do with me just yelling slogans or anything like that, you know what I mean? Because one of the things is for me, it was always important to read the thoughts of these people and then apply it to my daily life, you know, in all aspects of my life. Now, I want to say something else that was hidden as well. You know, the Black Panther Party, they went to North Korea. Nobody knows this, but I had to dig deep and find it. And yes, indeed, the Black Panther Party went to North Korea to get the same ideas. Many people don't know the Black Panther Party. They went to North Korea. They embrace Mao Zedong. They embrace the leadership of Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. This stuff is left out. So you have to dig, and dig, you know? And once you get digging, everything starts to come in full surface, and you realize, well, damn. You know, why does this Western media present these people as such bad people? You know, it comes into full surface. Now, you know, with North Korea, I'm going to be politically incorrect, and I support them basically having nukes, you know? Because let me give you the backdrop of why they need nukes, okay? This is an interview that was with I want to say the minister of the embassy of the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea in London, okay? About the nuclear program, you know, and why they have nuclear programming. Now, many people will say that, oh, North Korea, all they want to do is they want to attack and they want to bomb people, right? But historically, they haven't done that. There's only one country who's ever used nuclear weapons, and that was the United States, and we saw that against Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you know. But let's read this article. Now, I'm going to try to sum it up. I'm going to try to take the key points. He said, when the Western press comments on the nuclear program of the DPRK, it never talks about the core reasons behind that program. It is only interested in justifying U.S. bullying. It wants people to be blind to the underlying logic of our position. Our policy is simple and easy to understand. We need a nuclear deterrent. Before I go into this issue, I'd like to clarify that it is still DPRK's policy to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. It has always been our policy to get our country out of threat of nuclear war. In order to reach that aim, there is no choice but to develop our own nuclear capacity. And so, with me, what I say in regards to that is that African leaders need to take heed, and not be so vulnerable. We're too vulnerable. And while I'm not saying we need that kind of artillery, but we need better structures with our soldiers and stuff like that. So that way there may not be a need for all these damn United States military bases in Africa who are not even training our soldiers, who are just taking the resources. But let me continue on with what he said. After the Second World War, the U.S. was the only country in the world that had nuclear weapons. In order to further their strategy of global domination, they decided to use an atomic bomb against Japan. The facts show that there was no need for the U.S. to use such a weapon in that situation. In Europe, in May 1945, Hitler was defeated and the war ended. In the Pacific, the tide had turned totally against Japanese imperialism. It was obvious that the Soviet army would take part in the war against Japan, and Japan was losing the war with the U.S. It was just a matter of time before the Japanese war effort collapsed. Japan could not win against combined forces of the Soviet Union, Europe, China, and U.S., so they were looking for a way out. There was absolutely no need for the U.S. to use nuclear weapons. Inside the U.S. establishment, there were fierce arguments as to whether these weapons should be used. The people of the world didn't understand about the destructive power of nuclear weapons. Only U.S. leaders knew. They wanted the world to find out about how mighty these weapons were, so that the world would be forced to go along with U.S. policy. In order to achieve this aim, they didn't take into account how many lives would be lost. To them, the lives of ordinary Japanese people are like the lives of dogs, of animals. They would kill as many as possible in support of their geographical aims. And I mean, at the end of the day, we can't say dude is lying, Now, as far as Korea is concerned, this is him talking again. You know that Korea is just next door to Japan. Many Japanese lived in Korea because Korea was a colony of Japan. Our media system at the time was run by the Japanese. So when Hiroshima and Nagasaki occurred, we heard about it and we understood very well the scale of this disaster. The Korean people understood very well how many people were killed in the space of just a minute. So the Korean people had a very direct experience in nuclear warfare from the beginning. The Korean War started in 1950. The Americans thought they can easily win this war because they had all advanced conventional weapons, and they mobilized 16 satellite countries. At the time, China was only just liberated. The People's Republic of China was just 1 year old. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was still recovering from the vast destruction of the Second World War. So the U.S. thought it could easily win the Korean War. However, they found that their arrogance was misplaced. In fact, the Korean War was the first war that checked U.S. ambitions. So what that goes to tell you right there is that the United States I still think is butthurt at the simple fact that, they didn't get what they wanted, in that war. He goes on to say that the Korean People's Army and the Chinese volunteers fought with incredible strength against the U.S. from the U.S. point of view. This war was against communism, but the communists had the full support of the people of these countries. Korea and China were rural countries where the people were motivated by the idea of getting their own land. It is the Communist Party, the Workers' Party of Korea, that distributed land equally to all farmers. So the WBK had the full support of the people, and the masses of the people took part of the Korean War. They knew the situation of their brothers and sisters in South Korea, dominated by landlords and U.S. interests. And for those of you guys who don't know, the United States, man, or I should say North Korea, they had a series of military dictatorships, okay? Basically, they were strong armed, you know. And, you know, even one of the guys who was progressive, who wanted to consolidate and bring Korea back into one unified place, he was taken out by, you know, by help of the United States. So let's go on. So they understood that if the DPRK lost the war, the rule of the landlords would be restored and the land reform reversed. So that is why the ordinary Korean people got involved. Everybody got involved and did not hesitate to make every sacrifice. When he saw that the war was not going according to plan, Eisenhower asked his advisors, "How can we win this war?" The American general suggested using the nuclear threat. The U.S. felt that if they warned the population that they were going to drop the nuclear bomb, that people would flee from the front. Having witnessed the effects of nuclear warfare just 5 years previously, many people fled North Korea and went to the South. The result of this is there are still 10 million separated families. So you can see that the Korean people are direct victims of nuclear bullying. Us more so than anybody in the world. The nuclear issue is not an abstract one for us. We have to take it very seriously. We also have to say that, you know, that, you know, the United States, because they didn't want this brand of revolutionary self-sufficiency to spread, that they decided to build a base in South Korea and go and like also put nuclear weapons there. You know, we also have to consider the fact that, you know, in that war, the U.S. used chemical and napalm bombs on the North Korea, and they used those on regular people. They didn't use it necessarily on military casualties. So, you know, not only did United States threaten them with nukes, but you also had that, you know, South Korea was there with nukes. And you also had the fact that Japan was there with nukes as well. So you have three places basically pointing nuclear weapons at you. What are you going to do? Stand docile? But let's continue. The DPRK government had to find a strategy to prevent U.S. from using these weapons against us. In the 1970s, there was discussions among the big powers as to how they can prevent nuclear war. What the big five countries agreed is that they would stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Only 5 countries would be allowed to have nuclear weapons, and the others would not. The Non-Proliferation Treaty was born in 1970. The NPT clearly states that nuclear power states cannot use nuclear weapons for the purpose of threatening or endangering non-nuclear states. So the DPRK thought that if we joined the NPT, we would be able to get rid of the nuclear threat from the US. Therefore, we joined. However, the US never withdrew the right to preemptive nuclear strike. They always said once US interests are threatened, they always have the right to use their nuclear weapons for preemptive purposes. So it's quite obvious the NPT cannot ensure our safety on this basis. We decided to withdraw and to formulate a different strategy. Now, we fast forward and we look at September 11th. We know what happened. We also know what wars came after September 11th in Afghanistan and Iraq. We also understand what came with Libya as well, right? So, what happened that basically that the North Koreans decided that they couldn't put an end to the nuclear threat with conventional weapons alone. They had to develop their own nuclear weapons, you know. And the problem is that, you know, Russia and China wasn't willing to help. You know, and they also looked at what happened to Gaddafi in Libya. Once he got rid of his weapons, what happened? Invasion. You know, so, you know, the DPRK, they want the U.S. to give up its hostile policy and give up its military threat and normalize relations. But the United States simply doesn't want to do that. And the reason why they don't want to do that is because the United States wants its hands on the trillions of dollars, yes, trillions of dollars of natural resources in which North Korea possesses. Now you would be like, you would ask why, like, you hear stories about North Korea starving, North Korea being in poverty and things like that. These are the questions that are being asked. While, you know, every country has its flaws and that every country needs to improve, you know, what needs to be said is that a lot of what you hear about North Korea is propaganda. And so the reason why North Korea is having the problems it has as far as the structure, you know, the infrastructure. Yes, the infrastructure is because they're being starved out, you know. They actually put, like, I mean, the United States have have put like sanctions on them to a point where they can't even trade with you know, with different countries, you know. That's what, and so because they can't trade with these different countries and whatnot, it makes it kind of difficult to like develop your infrastructure, you know. You know, and we hear the like rhetoric that, you know, Kim Jong-un is a like dictator. He kills his own people. There's mass executions and stuff like that. But the reality is quite different, you know, and this comes from my uncle going to North Korea and other Africans going to North Korea. All right? Because at the end of the day, you know, at the end of the day, you know, my uncle stepped foot in North Korea, and he's like, everybody is just getting on with their business. You know, um, you know, there's culture there. Public transportation is almost free. Um, there's big apartments and houses given to the people. And I'm gonna end on this note. Me myself, I plan to go there. You know, like, I know it sounds crazy, but I need to see it for myself because my uncle recommended it. You know, I need to see what's going on. And one thing that also needs to be said is, you know, it's people are involved. At the end of the day, how can you run a country with only one person? It's not possible. It's a complicated process. You need a lot of people. You know, but the reason why I'm even more attracted to North Korea is because they have an idea called juche. And what juche is basically what juche is it basically means doing for self. You know, it means basically taking things by your bootstraps and handling shit yourself. So, you know, the leader of North Korea, you know, it means basically that you have to use what you have in order to gain more things, you know. But also, basically, the one thing that, and this is what I apply to my life, is that basically an individual is master of his own destiny.